There once was a clockmaker who lived in a town on a hill near the clouds. He was best at his craft of all in the world, for nothing excited him more than a chore. He labored and labored with barely a rest, for the joy of creation was his workbench and his bed. When his customers asked of his secrets, the source of his talents, he said simply, "There is a ticking inside me that steadies my hands, that gives me my strength, and that is why clocks of my craft are all through the land." But as the years ticked by over time, something went wrong. Somewhere deep in the clockmaker's heart, a small fleshy gear had ground to a halt. The ticking inside him had stopped. Perhaps he had grown lazy, the clockmaker thought, so he toiled ever harder. He surrounded himself with his craft, packing his workshop with 1,000 ticking clocks. But it didn't work. Instead, he slowly understood, with each swing of his 1,000 pendulums, that the ticking inside him had stopped because he labored alone and was glum. So, the clockmaker who lived in the town on a hill near the clouds grew sad. His days grew dark, his nights grew long, until he met the man with the clockwork ether. The man had heard of the clockmaker's sorrow and brought with him a magical gear, a thing one of a kind that could give a clock joy and life and tears. And so the man offered the clockmaker a deal. "I can erase your sadness with the ether's spell," he said, "if you give me the clocks of your workshop to sell." Could the clockmaker make such a choice? Years of his work gone? The clockmaker gave it barely a thought. His decision was made. What else could it be? He gave the man his clocks and set out to work. He gathered every last part that remained in his shop. He labored day and night, never stopping, never halting. His workshop was empty now, but it bothered him not, because deep in his heart that fleshy gear stirred, and he felt the faint tickle of a tick and a tock. Hours turned to days, days turned to months, until at last, on his workbench, it was finished. She was finished, his clockwork daughter. He clicked in the ether in a slot on her wrist. Her gears began to creak. Her eyes opened wide. Her hand reached out, so did his, and they met. She didn't let go. He took her away from the town on a hill near the clouds. He took her to places afar and abound. They saw oceans wide and mountains tall, cities gleaming, and leaves in fall. All the while, she held his hand and didn't let go. With each new land that came into view, he saw in her wonder the joy he once knew. Every step they took ticked with purpose. And when at last they had exhausted all places to roam, they turned inward for new worlds to explore. Above the clouds, beneath the seas, in search of clockwork mysteries. When at last she was grown, the clockmaker vowed they'd return from their journey to the town on the hill near the clouds. And once there, he'd teach her his craft, fill their workshop again, and fill their lives with ticking and ticking and ticking. But once again, all was not well. One night, his clockwork daughter awoke in a panic. Her gears screeched, her pendulum arms quivered. She held the clockmaker's hand and didn't let go. When the clockmaker checked her from head and to toe, his hand felt her wrist, and he gasped at the truth. The clockwork ether was damaged and loose. He knew right away, with her hand in his hand, that should he ever remove his fingers, the ether would sputter and whimper and then turn to sand. The clockmaker was faced with a terrible choice. He could make no more clocks with merely one arm. Should he continue to hold her, the work of his life would be gone. But the clockmaker gave it barely a thought. The decision was made. What else could it be? She held his hand and never let go. And neither did he.